All right, you checking in with Mike Williams from the LA Chargers, and you're tuning in to Chargers Unleashed.
Welcome to another edition of Chargers Unleashed. Jake Hefner and Dan Wolkenstein here with you from the LA Football Network. If this is your first time tuning in to the show, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Dan Wolkenstein, one of my favorite shows of the entire year, whether it's in season, off season, but especially this time as we get closer inside 2 weeks of the NFL draft. The special guests are coming and they are coming heavy. Dan Wolkenstein, we have a very special guest, the man who kicked off Chargers Unleashed, opened it up, was the inaugural episode. Dan, who was it?
Lead NFL draft analyst for PFF, Mr. Trevor Sikkema, also co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange. You know who he is. You see his name everywhere. Joins us again, friend of the show on Chargers Unleashed to talk all things NFL draft, what the Chargers might do at 22. You'll get some in-depth, behind the curtains, in the weeds discussions, and I guarantee you will learn something on this one. Trevor is one of the best, if not the best, in the industry, and you're about to hear why. Trevor Sikkema joins us next on Chargers Unleashed. Well, we have a very special guest today. Year 4 of him joining the show from the beginning. Mr. Trevor Sikkema, the god himself of all things NFL draft and player scouting and comps and you name it. Newly married as well. Trevor Sikkema joined us here on Chargers Unleashed. Trevor Sikkema, congratulations, my friend, and welcome back.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate you having me on the show. I didn't realize it was 4 years in a row, so this is cool. It really is. Like right before we hit record, you said it's like the Masters, a tradition unlike any other. So it's good to be back with you guys. Talk a little Chargers football here.
Absolutely. It's kind of like you and Connor always talk about your certain pods that you have, especially leading up to the draft. That you say, like, this one's always one of your most anticipated ones of the year. Always having you on, and this is not like trying to, boost the ego, anything, but it honestly is one of my favorite pods when we get a chance to have you. Not only is it draft season, but as Dan mentioned, you helped launch Chargers Unleashed when it first was created. And it was just a perfect timing of that plus the draft. And now we're making this a reoccurring thing. Great to have you back.
Well, I appreciate it, man. I'll take it as an ego boost anyways, because I'm a narcissist and I need that. So
it works.
Because you need more. You need more. Florida wins, then you got married. Now we're giving you a boost. Like, what else is there to give you?
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys. It means a lot. Again, it's fun. I enjoy coming on this podcast. And when you cover the NFL and just the NFL draft from a national perspective, sometimes you can't get as in the weeds. And so getting to join shows where people have a really good feel for what the team really needs, and we get to have a lot of cool discussions about that is something that I really enjoy. And so that includes obviously coming on the show here with you guys.
Well, let's get into it then. Chargers fans have been in their feelings throughout this entire offseason, ever since that loss last year against Texas in the playoffs. But it helped focus on the things that are much needed for this Chargers team. They had a ton of holes, a ton of free agents. They filled a bunch of those holes, still some to be filled. And now that the NFL draft comes into focus, just less than 2 weeks away now, which is insane.
Mm-hmm.
From a macro perspective, from your side looking in, what do you foresee as the Chargers' biggest needs, but specifically from the lens of who Jim Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz are and want to be?
Yeah, so I think that obviously everybody talks about those two guys wanting to really build through the trenches. We showed that last year when, it's a class of all sorts of skill position players, a lot of different guys to choose from. It was an incredibly talented class last year, and they opt to go for Joe Alt, even though, okay, well, they could have maybe gotten by at offensive line. They could have maybe addressed it a little bit later in the draft. They didn't have to do that at the very beginning. Joe Alt was going to have to switch from left tackle to right tackle, so you take that into account as well. And it didn't matter. He ended up being the choice when it was all said and done because they wanted to dominate in the trenches. And so you see that. You see the Mekhi Becton ad in free agency this year. You're bringing back Bradley Bozeman to make sure that at least the offensive line floor is not getting any lowered as you continue to raise the ceiling for that group. And so I do feel as though if they have a trench need, they're going to prioritize it. And this year specifically, I think the Chargers have a couple of needs certainly going into the draft. Tight end and wide receiver, skill position players just overall. I think that those are two areas that they could absolutely hit. But it's hard for me to think that they're not going to use their pick in the early 20s on a defensive lineman because you're losing a guy like Poona Ford in free agency. You don't want to take a step back when it comes to certainly run defense, winning on those early downs. And this is a really good draft for interior defensive linemen. There's a lot of guys to choose from. Kenneth Grant obviously is one that Jim Harbaugh is very familiar with. Walter Nolen's in this group, Darius Alexander, Derrick Harmon. Like, there's a lot of good interior defensive linemen that could be the pick for them there in the 20s. And so for as much as, they need to get better at the skilled positions, I think you can hit those a little bit later in the draft. And it does feel as though the priority for them after free agency and where the roster currently stands is going to be making sure that the defensive trenches now are as good as they need to be.
I want to spotlight that real quick because I know that you and Connor had just came out with your defensive line rankings, your edge rankings as well. And as it relates to this being one of the deepest classes, especially in the interior of the defensive line, and what you were just mentioning about the Chargers' need for it, especially because you bring Tyler Tard back, you bring in Deshaun Hand, and a good majority of the interior of the defensive line is only on one-year deals. Mm-hmm. And a majority of them are good at, run stuffing. But there's not really much pass rush juice left, especially after Poona Ford's departure. So if it was you, and whether we're talking day 1, day 2, and I know that you were high on an Omarion lot for very specific reasons, and I love what I've seen from his game, but in general, if there was ones that you could say, that's a Harbaugh guy, even outside of Kenneth Grant or some of the guys that you just dropped, where would your focus be going?
Yeah, so it kind of depends on exactly where they feel they are weakest. Again, I think Poona Ford is one of the more underrated players in the NFL. So losing him, I don't think it's just like, oh, okay, you lost him. Like, you'll replace him. It'll be fine. Deshaun Hand is there. You mentioned Tyler Tart is there. Egbuka is there as the other spot. But like you said, it doesn't feel like they have either an anchor that they're building their interior around or a long-term option for them. And so I feel as though they're going to gravitate towards that. So again, like a Kenneth Grant, a Walter Nolen, I think those two guys make a lot of sense. Tyleik Williams is somebody who obviously Jim Harbaugh is familiar with, seeing him at Ohio State, having to play against him while he was at Ohio State. He knows what he could be as a run stuffer there. I think CJ West would also be excellent for this team. I don't think they're going to draft him in the first round at 22, but this is a team that, God, how many picks do they have? They have a lot of picks in this year's draft. Yeah, they got 10 picks in this year's draft. And normally you don't want to bring in 10 rookies. So you're probably going to try to trade up and down, or maybe even get some of those picks into next year and trade them off. So I don't think they're going to be bringing in a rookie class of 10. You're hoping it's, maybe closer to 8. So you could very well be moving up and down to get the players that you want, especially somewhere on day 2. So, I think CJ West, Alfred Collins, maybe Vernon Broughton, even his teammate, those two guys from Texas, I think those could be excellent choices for them. If they want to go with more of a pass rushing interior defensive lineman, then you start talking about guys like maybe Derrick Harmon is the pick for them at 22. Maybe you do look at TJ Sanders from South Carolina, Omar Norman Lott, who I like a lot in this class. Those are guys that you probably think about in the second round, but it just sort of depends what type of interior defensive lineman you really want. Do you want a mainstay who you could build your run defense around for the long term, somebody who's going to be there for a while, sort of that cornerstone piece? Because if you do, you're probably going with those previous names. But if you want more of a splash guy who's not who is going to be a pass rusher for you, then I think that Derrick Harmon, Omar Norman Lott, TJ Sanders, guys like that sort of come into play.
Okay, I'm gonna do a quick exercise. Jesse Minter, formerly from Michigan, he has 4 pillars. So Trevor Sikkema, we're gonna do this live. Close your eyes. I'm going to give you the 4 pillars, and you tell me who the first name that comes to mind on the defensive line that aligns to it.
Okay.
Block destruction, ball disruption, effort, and communication. Who's the first guy that aligns to all 4 of those?
I don't know how much I can speak to communication, but Walter Nolen's probably the perfect player because he's hitting the first 3 with flying colors. I mean, this dude is somebody who can be a menace getting off of blocks. Now, he doesn't have as many pass rush counters yet, but he is incredibly strong. And as he develops those, he's got the baseline of strength to be able to do it. What was the second one? It was block deconstruction.
Ball disruption. And
yeah.
effort.
I mean, this is somebody who if he hits you, you better be holding on to the ball pretty tight or the ball's going to pop out. So that's somebody who I think that he fits that bill as well. Effort. I mean, this dude, he has got a really good motor for an interior defensive lineman. I think he's got one of the best motors for any interior defensive lineman in the class. I love that relentlessness that he plays with. Communication, I don't know, you would kind of have to ask the coaches about that. I mean, like sometimes you could see stuff like that on tape, but it's not as often you see that from interior defensive linemen, or I should just say defensive linemen in general. And, you know, Ole Miss is one of those teams that a lot of what they do is very streamlined on both sides of the ball. So normally you'll sort of break huddle and it's like, this is my job. Like, this is my assignment. It doesn't necessarily take a lot of communication. There's not a lot of like pre-snap adjustments that I feel like Ole Miss does. At least that's just what I'm thinking off the top of my head. But Walter Nolen is the guy that I think of immediately when I hear those four pillars.
Since the Houston Texans playoff game for the Chargers, Jim Harbaugh, Joe Ortiz have both collectively said that they did a disservice to Justin Herbert, whether it was through the season in terms of not getting him enough weapons. And we know how they obviously look at offensive line, tip of the spear, anything of that aspect. But there's been so many mock conversations about Colston Loveland possibly being the pick if he's there at 22. Outside of that, you bring Mike Williams back on a one-year deal. You know what you have in Ladd McConkey. Quentin Johnston is still kind of coming into his own. It's still maybe like an incomplete grade as it stands right now. As it relates to just weapons in general, and obviously knowing Jim Harbaugh and the way that he wants to run this offense when bringing Najee Harris in, what is really the best avenue for them in terms of what it is that they're trying to build, do you think?
Probably emphasizing the tight end position at number 22 if they can. Because, like you mentioned, winning up front is the tip of the spear, as he says. If you can get a Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren, that checks both boxes. That allows you to be even more dominant when it comes to the blocking game, because you're getting somebody who, okay, Colston Loveland, he's not a destroyer, but he's somebody who is pound for pound pretty strong blocking. I'd say the same thing about Tyler Warren. I wouldn't say that he's like a destroyer of a blocker, but he's got a good frame. He's got good strength to him. He helps out the offensive line. And then both of those guys, we saw over the last 2 years, really what they have been in the passing game. So I would tell you that even though it's a really good tight end class, you're probably looking at one of those two targets at number 22. Certainly guys like Emeka Egbuka, guys like Elikayo Maynard, Jayden Higgins, Jack Bash. Those are players who can block for you as well as be great receivers for you as well. I think that if you're talking about a wide receiver at 22, I would probably say Emeka Egbuka is your guy. I think that makes the most sense in my opinion.
Really?
Yeah. I think that just his game is so all around, and I think we're bored. I think we're bored of Emeka Egbuka. Like, I really do. Like, I think that he was great 3 years ago. He went through that injured year. And then this past year, he happened to just sit behind Jeremiah Smith, who like might go number 1 overall in 2 years. So it's one of those things where I think Emeka Egbuka could be like a wide receiver 1 type of player for you. I don't think that he gets in the way of Ladd McConkey targets. I think you could play both of those guys in the slot or as a Z. Are either of them like super tall to play like as a red zone threat and like as an X receiver? No, but like we know that Ladd McConkey can block pretty well pound for pound. I think that Emeka Egbuka can do the same thing. And I think that's what I'm saying just at 22. If you wanted a wide receiver if you wanted to wait, if you're comfortable waiting, then you start to get guys like Elikayo Maynard, Jayden Higgins, again, Jack Bash, like those types of wide receivers that I think could really help out this team as like bigger body guys who can help you in the blocking game as well as the receiving game. So that's sort of who comes to my mind first for them.
Quick plug for PFF, by the way. We have our wide receiver rankings coming up here, I think, in the next couple of days. And super high, Jake and I haven't even talked about our guys yet, but super high on Jayden Higgins. And some of the stats from PFF for him are just stupid. Like, you see I think it was 99% or 99 receiving grade on intermediate routes, second best grade in all of FBS in zone coverage, and the second best receiving grade of all FBS, 90.5. Like, that's elite. And so I guess the question I was going to ask you was, like, at 22, maybe it's Tet if he falls, who knows, or Emeka Egbuka, but who would be, because I already can hear Chargers fans like freaking out, just like they did on day 1 last year, if they don't go receiver or tight end in round 1. So if you were to peg just a couple fits at those positions that would be like, Chargers fans, relax. This guy, they have tons of options. Here are a couple on day 2 and day 3 that might fit the needs that you guys have. Because I think a lot of Chargers fans believe that they think that an X receiver is needed, just based on what the roster doesn't have. Not sure if that's what this team actually wants or will do, but who are some guys day 2, day 3 that can help alleviate some of the stress if they do go outside of those positions around the
Yeah,
line?
there's a lot. And like, I understand, fans love wide receivers. I love watching wide receiver play. They're obviously paramount to an offense, functioning the way that it needs to. But I don't say this to necessarily like devalue anytime that you want to prioritize a wide receiver getting drafted high in the draft, but you have the opportunity to acquire a wide receiver every single year, multiple times a year. Like that's why there are certain there are certain premium positions that you just don't have the opportunity to take every year. For example, like a pass protector. That's why you drafted Joe Alt, because you can't get one in the trade market. They're never available. You can't get one in free agency. They're never available. You have to draft them in the first round typically, or you don't have one at all. That's basically how it goes. Sometimes you get lucky and you get one in the second or third round and they develop into a starter. But I think the same thing for like elite pass rushers too. I think the same thing for like shutdown corners. But wide receiver, dude, Tyreek Hill has been traded. DeAndre Hopkins has been traded. Stephon Diggs has been traded multiple times. AJ Brown's been traded. These guys just get like T. Higgins was up for trade. People were talking about Brandon Ayuk. DK Metcalf just got traded. The pro market and the draft market, basically every single year, you can get a wide receiver at the trade deadline, you can get him at free agency, and you get him in the draft. You can. So I know that people freak out when you have an opportunity to take a wide receiver and you don't get one, but as long as your organization knows that they're going to and knows the importance of the position, you don't have to force it at a certain spot or at a certain timeline, in my opinion. So with all that being said, there's plenty of opportunity to get a great wide receiver later in the draft. I think that at the tight end position, if you want a receiving tight end, Elijah Arroyo is great. He's my tight end 3 in this class. I think that Mason Taylor right after him, Terrance Ferguson, like all 3 of those guys could easily be tight end 2s in the NFL. And in some offenses, maybe they could develop even into tight end 1s, especially as receivers. For X receivers specifically, second round, probably like Trey Harris from Ole Miss, a vertical stretching wide receiver, a guy who I think really improved this past season, who I didn't like at all in 2023. I thought he was a one-trick pony. I thought he couldn't get off the line of scrimmage. I thought his release package sucked. I thought he was just like a contested catch and vertical 9-route wide receiver. And that is still what he mainly does at Ole Miss, or he did this past year. But at least he was a lot more savvy in how he got off the line of scrimmage, how he won cleanly, and so he's creating a little bit more separation there. So I think that he is a good option for them there. I think Deontay Thornton from Tennessee, another vertical stretching wide receiver. Andrew Armstrong from Arkansas, another dude who is big, tall, fast, can be a vertical stretcher for you. So there is somebody, and even if you want to get like a little bit further, like Samuel Brown from Miami is somebody that you could think about as a vertical stretching guy on day 3. Like there are so many good wide receivers to pick. Round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4, round 5. Like you can find the wide receivers that you need. So especially having 10 picks in this draft, those are a couple of names that I think would be good Chargers fits.
Yeah, side note on Trey Harris. As we were going through our rankings for that, I happened to look back in the text message thread from a year ago to what I said to Dan. And it was actually 2 days after the draft that I started reviewing everybody for this coming year's draft. And I said, okay, one guy I'm pounding the table for next year, it's Trey Harris. And Dan's message back to me was, you are a sick individual. The draft just ended. What are you doing? So it can never be too early. Can never be too early. I actually wanted just to go into the weeds with you a little bit as it relates to this offensive line group, more so the interior of the offensive linemen, and not even necessarily relating to the Chargers, because there's been so much perception that it's going to be a crowded guard market because you either have guys that measurables that played tackle could maybe better off on the inside, and especially around this year's center group, because it's way different than what we perceived that it was going to look like from the beginning of this year to now. You had guys return to school, guys who dropped in their draft stock due to injury, and now you got guys like Gray Zabel now being looked at as, the top center on the board. Just in general, how have you seen this group as it relates to the offensive line kind of develop, whether it's through summer scouting and watching them through All-Star Week and ultimately to now? What are your takeaways of this group as a whole?
It's sort of beauty is in the eye of the beholder with a lot of this offensive line class, because Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks Jr., Donovan Jackson, Marcus Bowe, Jonah Savanaia, Cam Williams, Charles Grant, Wyatt Milam, Anthony Belton. Like, I'm just scrolling my big board here. Logan Brown, like all of those dudes, you could say to yourself, they tackles or guards. We don't know. Like, this is a lot of offensive linemen. Normally, you get like one or two guys. It's like, all right, yeah, they could be a guard, they could be a tackle. Somebody. I just listed off a ton of guys that you go, okay, are they tackles or guards? We don't know. And I think the default for a lot of people is if the question ever comes up, are they a tackle or guard? They go, they're a guard. That's the default for everybody. If you have to decide, they're a guard. And so I just wonder how many teams in the NFL, that's their default. If you question it at all, they're a guard, especially in the first round. And so that's sort of what makes this exercise pretty interesting, because there are a couple of those guys that I could even like see at center. You mentioned Grey Zabel as one of them. I think he's just a versatile interior defensive lineman, or offensive lineman, excuse me. But like Will Campbell, I think could play center. Marcus Bowe, I think could play center. Charles Grant could potentially play center, right? There's a lot of these guys who it's not just, okay, are they a tackle or a guard? Like they're almost where's their best five? And some people look at that as sort of a negative. They just go, okay, well, versatility along the offensive line, you're not so sure it's a positive, because if there's question marks, then you just see that as innately a negative. But there are a lot of names, there are a lot of players that I think will populate the NFL through offensive lines all over the league. I just don't know how many of them are surefire 100%. They're going to be tackles and they're going to be great. But I think we are going to get a pretty good influx of just offensive linemen overall, even if most of them are interior guys.
I want to kind of maybe shed some light, kind of peek behind the curtains a little bit for draft rooms in terms of focusing on what positions you can get starters in, depending on what round, like how deep that class goes. Like, for example, you can probably get a starting tight end round 1, round 2, but after that, it might kind of drop off a little bit. Running back, you can go for days, basically. What are some of the positions where, like, you got to get those early that maybe the Chargers should prioritize versus the position groups that are deep to where you can still get starting caliber players later on?
I would say the classes that aren't as deep this year, quarterback for sure. I know they don't have a need at quarterback, but it's worth saying. Quarterback is not very deep this year. Tackle gets a little tricky depending on how you view the class. I would say linebacker for sure. If you don't get one of, I would say, the top 4 or 5 linebackers, like Jahad Campbell, Jalen Walker, Demetrius Knight, Carson Schwessinger, Chris Paul. Like, if you don't get any of those 5, and even like Chris Paul, I think is probably a 3rd round pick. Demetrius Knight might end up being like a late 2nd, early 3rd round pick type of a player. If you don't get any of those guys, like I don't think you're getting starting caliber linebacker play. Although, hey, we see in the draft all the time, you get these day 3 guys, they can sometimes stick at linebacker. But just overall, the way that I'm looking at the class, I think it drops off a decent amount. Corner, I think, is the position that also drops off pretty heavy. Safety a little bit. But actually, I reviewed this safety class again over the last couple of weeks. And I'm like, you know what? I don't hate it. I think that it's okay. Is it star-studded? Is it super deep? No, but I think that it's okay. So I would say quarterback, maybe offensive tackle, depending on how you look at it, linebacker, and then corner are the positions where if you want one of those, you basically got to pick them in the top 75, or I don't think you're getting a rotational or starting caliber player.
Which is kind of interesting for Chargers fans to note. The positions that Trevor just mentioned, luckily, the Chargers basically have in spades already. They've got Rashawn Slater. They've got Joe Alt. Check. They've got Justin Herbert. Check. And then you look at safety, Derwin James. They're golden. Right? Don't worry about that one. Linebacker, they got Deion Henley and Junior Colston already on this team. So position groups that are most deep, probably corner would be the one. And Jake, you and I have talked about this a few times. That's the sneaky one where if this Chargers team does prioritize that position, which they do, don't be surprised if they go after that position group earlier than you might think, because it is not as deep as the others.
Yeah, sorry, Trevor, didn't mean to cut you off. That was actually going to be my next question as it relates to the cornerback position. As it relates to ones that you feel fitting Jesse Minter's defense specifically, I know that you and Connor are big and on Maxwell Harrison. And again, this cornerback class has shifted a lot when you look at the injuries of Shavon Revel, Benjamin Morrison, and now it's Jedi Barron essentially at the top, behind Travis Hunter, obviously. But it's another one that's kind of shifted. So if it's more fits from you see from guys who excel in the zone defense better than anything else, what would you target in that circumstance? And again, sorry to cut you off.
No. So we're doing something at PFF that we're kind of running out of time here, and I wish we would have done this a little bit sooner. But doing the draft guide kind of, I don't want to say got in the way, because doing the draft guide is what we do every single year. But I wanted to release team specific top 100s, like not just have like a top 350 big board. Like I actually wanted to make team specific top 100s. And this year we don't have the time to like dive too deep into like GM tendencies and like GM history and things like that. But we want to do that for next year. But I want to at least put out team specific top 100s on the data that we have of how these teams played last year when it came to certain schemes, especially when it's defensive and offensive and head coaching staffs that are retained. So when
you could just send the Chargers ones to us offline. We can post it for us. Don't worry about it. You're fine.
So the Chargers ones, and like sometimes I'm trying to make sure that I'm like going through the data correctly. But the way that I have the Chargers one set up right now is they play two high safety shells 55% of the time, single high safety 45% of the time. So they like to play with two safeties back there. Not saying they don't rotate one down or up depending on what the matchups are saying post snap, but like they like to align with two safeties deep. Zone coverage 65% of the time, which is pretty heavy. That's one of the higher zone coverage marks that we had. And then I showed that nickel is basically the new base at this point. That's the phrase that everybody says, but they also run a decent amount of dime. So going back to what you said, you need corners to be able to do those things. So that's sort of when I think about corner as a need for them. I think about these more zone heavy corners, which thankfully there are more zone than man corners here in this draft. And what was the alignment? The preferred alignment? Oh, they go off coverage a lot. So if I'm kind of like reading this correctly, more than 50% being too high, 65% being zone coverage, off coverage is the more preferred alignment for them, and they run a lot of nickel and dime. That feels like they run a lot of quarter stuff. Like they run a lot of quarters, so they run a lot of cover three. So that's sort of the way that I read, okay, who would be good fits for them in the secondary. Yeah, I think that Jahdae Barron would be an excellent fit for them. I think Will Johnson would be an excellent fit for them. Travis Hunter is the very obvious one. But, I think that Trey Amos, I think he's a little bit more of a man coverage corner, but I think his zone coverage stuff got better this offseason. I think Benjamin Morrison, again, is a little bit more of a man coverage corner, but he could do a lot of different stuff for you. Maxwell Harrison, I think, would be a good fit for them. Darian Porter from Iowa State, the super long multi-state champion background track guy who showed that off at the combine this year. And I think a sneaky one for me, maybe some like round 4 that I think would be a good fit for them is Dorian Strong, the Virginia Tech cornerback. I just think that he has some good length to him. He's played in the press alignment before, but his biggest weaknesses sort of come from, ironically enough, I don't know if he's strong enough to play in press consistently at the NFL level, but I think he's excellent in cover 3 and off coverage situations. So like if you feel like you want to hit trenches in the first round, tight end, wide receiver in the second and third round, you get to the 4th round, you go, hey, we need a corner. I think Dorian Strong could be somebody that they like, because he's also a pretty willing tackler as well. I think Mel Dodson could be in that same conversation. O'Donnell Fortune from South Carolina, if you want to take a chance on a guy who's sort of like this year's Tariq Woolen, Azaf Frazier from UTSA, sort of that 6'3", 185 pound, like long, lean, super athletic, just doesn't really know what he's doing. Like that's sort of somebody that you could take a chance on there. So those are some of the off coverage, zone coverage corners that I think could make sense for him.
Clearly, we are talking to NFL draft expert and PFF expert Trevor Sikkema. We're going to get your bold takes and your predictions for this Chargers team. Well, maybe we'll do day 1 and day 2. But before that, I think Chargers fans and Greg Roman, for that matter, have been dying to see Jim Harbaugh give Justin Herbert a run game. Mm-hmm. And you saw a little bit of that last year at times, but there's a lot of injuries that plagued him with Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins. They bring in Najee Harris, who's the workhorse. Like if you had a poster child of that, like this is this guy, 3.9 yards per carry, but 1,000 yards every season he's here, doesn't get hurt. They have Kamani Vidal. In your opinion, who is kind of like the Robin to the Batman of this running back room? Let's just say Najee Harris to pair, right? Like, There's a lot of TreVeyon Henderson talks. There's a lot of Omarion Hampton, which I don't think Omarion Hampton's going to be there. But Henderson, that might be a little rich for 22. But like, who are some guys at maybe day 1, day 2, maybe one day 1, one day 2, one day 3? That would be like, ooh, that would be fun.
I think Hampton probably makes the most sense for them if you're going to draft a guy in the first round, because Genty's not going to make it to them. Hampton's just the next guy that's there. I love Cam Scattaboo, but you're not going to draft him after just signing Najee Harris, having Hassan Haskins on the roster, having Kamani Vidal on the roster. It's a lot of the same. So you wouldn't be drafting a player like that at 22. I just don't think that you would be doing that. Day 2, I think TreVeyon Henderson does make a lot of sense for them because he could be nice for you in the receiving game. Like, he could be a really good complement and a good speed back to complement Najee Harris there. I love RJ Harvey from UCF. Like, I think that he could be a fit just because he's a very all-around type of a player. DJ Giddens sort of the same way. Now, sort of as you get into like day 3, Jarquez Hunter feels like their type. Now, I don't know if he brings them anything different per se. Like, sometimes when you look at running back rooms, you go like, okay, well, they have some power here. Let's get some speed in there. Jarquez Hunter, in my opinion, is just sort of like an all-around back, which he has been from Auburn. He can kind of do it all, but I genuinely think like he could be great in this offense. And I think he is their type of player. He's sort of like the way that you talk about Blake Corum is the way that you would talk about Jarquez Hunter. I don't think he's as good of a player, but it's sort of that similar role, somewhat similar of a build. They can kind of do it all for you. Good yards after contact averages, pretty good vision behind the line of scrimmage. So he is somebody that I would think about just because he's their type. Like, somebody that I really like, Brashard Smith from SMU, former wide receiver turned into a running back, sort of this year's Tyrone Tracy type of a player. He gives them something as a third down receiving back that I feel like they don't necessarily have right now. I think the same could be said for Marcus Yarns, who is at the Senior Bowl, halfback from Delaware. He does his best work as a receiver. So those are a couple that I think could very well be like Chargers targets there. Like maybe a Trevor Etienne as well, because I think that he could bring you some value in third downs as a receiver. And then I guess I'll say like my late sleeper, like somebody who they would probably draft like round 6, round 7, just to throw a name out there. Jaquavius Marks. He just goes by Woody Marks. Woody is his nickname. He was at Mississippi State for 4 years before he transferred to USC this past season. And his best work absolutely just comes as a receiver. I mean, they used him as a ton as a receiver when he was at Mississippi State. He doesn't have great vision as a runner. Like, he just doesn't have a great feel for space. So he's not going to be somebody who's going to be like cracking a starting rotation for you. But like as a third down back, hey, we need this guy in there to catch some swing passes, some wheel routes, some Texas routes, be a mismatch against linebackers, whatever. Like, he can maybe do a little bit of that. So like that's a late, like 6th, 7th round, take a flyer on a guy maybe for a skill set we don't have type of a thing.
Trevor, we'll get you out of here with this one. I'm going to preface this crystal ball question for you, but I actually using a quote that you said last year on the show. And this was when we were asking you about just your perception on Jim Harbaugh coming in as the head coach. And you've said a quote that I've actually regurgitated a number of times on this show since then. But you said, whatever Jim Harbaugh wants to do, it's going to work. Doesn't matter what it is, but it's going to work. So now knowing what we've got 1 year in with Jim Harbaugh as the head coach, going into the 2025 NFL draft, let's get the perceived home run picks, one on day 1 and one on day 2. If the Chargers can come away with these 2 players, they're winning.
So I'll obviously keep it somewhat, I want to keep it like realistic, right? For somebody that I think is going to make it to 22.
Sure.
I think Kenneth Grant can make it to 22. I think that's a home run pick for them. I think Walter Nolen can as well. I'm going to have him as like a top 15 player in the class, but I've heard that like he could be up and down on teams' boards. Now, I again, like going back to like the communication of the character side of things, that's the part that I cannot predict. I don't really have a good feel for that whatsoever. So like Kenneth Grant or Walter Nolen, I like both of those guys in the first round. And then to be honest with you, like second round, because where's their pick? 55 and 86. What receiver could I give them? Because now I'm like building draft strategies in my head.
Uh-huh. Because I'll give you some time here. Like, this is what happened last year, where there was the Joe Alt Lab McConkey combo of which two would be.
Okay, I got
sense.
it. All right, I got it.
Ooh.
Kenneth Grant at 22. Trey Harris in the second round. Terrance Ferguson in the third.
I would absolutely do backflips and throw something at Jake's television if that goes down.
TV.
I mean, I gotta keep it TV. Sorry, I'll throw food somewhere else.
I think that's my best case scenario for them, because if not, like, I'm trying to think about it. Like, okay, Colston, Loveland at 22, and then you're probably going maybe Darius at no. Let's go Colston, Loveland at 22. Who's another wide receiver? Like Elikai O'Maynor maybe in the second round, and then third round, like CJ West. Like that's another draft strategy that I'm thinking about. I think I like Kenneth Grant, Trey Harris, Terrance Ferguson more than I like Colston, Loveland, insert interior defensive lineman we think would be good here, and then like a wide receiver a little bit later, or maybe the other way around. I think that now that I'm sort of like thinking about draft strategies, the one that I like the most, prioritizes trenches, Kenneth Grant, Trey Harris, Terrance Ferguson. That's what I would love for them.
Honestly, great. Chargers fans will be through the roof if they go to bed with head in the pillow night 2 with those three. That'd be
a pretty sick haul. That'd be pretty good.
Epic.
It'd be pretty good.
Trevor, we appreciate you, dude. This is so fun. You're clearly doing all kinds of things year round. Your work does not stop. What is the next thing that you are trying to get out?
I'm trying to do these team top 100 big boards. I'm trying to get those out.
Are we gonna see it?
I'm trying to. I have
well,
5...
Chargers fans will see it, because no matter what, Trevor's just going to send it to us. We can let it out for the group. We'll get a quick behind the curtain. It's fine.
I have 5 of the 8 divisions done, and I'm going to try to pedal to the metal this weekend, get the rest of the divisions done, because I would like to be cranking these out all next week, because it's the last full week that we have, obviously, before the draft. So I want to try to get this to people as soon as possible now that the draft guide is out and done, which people should go to pff.com, get a PFF subscription, and get the draft guide. We would love you forever for it if you did. But then, just be on the lookout for those team top 100s, which hopefully will have a lot of very great and useful information for you guys on who I think that your team could be targeting.
Well, Trevor, all you need to do is just put on that Elite 8 game if you want motivation.
Yes.
And just fly.
Go Gators, baby. Go Gators.
Oh, Trevor, thank you so much for coming on here, dude. This has been so much fun. Year 4 in the books for you coming on here. This has been a blast. You can find Trevor anywhere. Just Google him. He's kind of like the guy at this point. Don't forget about us little folks when we get even bigger, okay? Remember who's got you here.
I can never.
Not us, by the way. Not us. Trevor Sikkema, thank you so much for joining us, and we will talk to you soon, all right, buddy?
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Anytime.
Thanks, Trevor.